Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the CTE Coordinators, Principals, and Counselors meeting. We're so happy that so many of you have chosen to join us today, and I know that many others will watch the recorded video later. I'm going to very quickly take you through the agenda for today, and then I'm going to turn it over to David Horstman to kick us off. Before I do that, though, I want to point out that you can ask questions throughout the presentation today at app.gosoapbox.com and use the access code CTE Virtual. We do have scheduled times where we'll be doing question and answers throughout the presentation today. And then as you can see from today's agenda, we will have 2 short breaks to give you a rest from listening to us, during which time you can take a break or you can ask more questions, because right after both of those breaks and at the very end, we will do Q&A from each of the sessions so that we can answer as many of your questions as possible. But because we have a lot because we have so much to cover with you today, we just want to make sure that we get through all of it. So with that, I am going to turn it over to David Horstman to kick us off. David.
Thank you, Kylie, and good afternoon, everyone. Since our last convening at the 2019 KACTE Leadership Conference, we are on our 3rd commissioner. The CTE task force met over the course of months, concluding more funding and more equitable funding for CTE are needed. To school closure for 3 months due to the COVID-19 with weekly guidance and waivers, and finally how to reopen schools again. Let's just pause and thank everyone, including students and parents, for getting us to this point. During this challenging time, we've been fortunate to have CTO leadership that made it possible for students to compete in state and national virtual conferences and students elected to national offices. Within the last year, Kentucky has concluded a 3-year national grant from the J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, known as the New Skills for Youth Grant. Kentucky was one of only 10 states selected to receive funding for the transformation of the CTE system through this grant initiative. Since 2016, the KDE has utilized the New Skills for Youth funding to leverage strategies for scaling all-day regional career academies across the Commonwealth. This model is aimed at expanding greater access, particularly in the state's rural areas, to high-quality, in-demand CTE programming at the secondary level. The Career Academy model integrates general education and in-demand CTE pathways through a full-time technical school approach, which is layered with intensive acceleration opportunities such as dual credit, advanced placement coursework, stackable industry-related credentialing, a continuum of work-based learning opportunities, and strong college and career advising approaches. To date, 3 cohorts of regional academies have begun the transformational work. I want to take the time to congratulate these regional academy sites, as well as the districts involved with each academy. Your tireless work to reinvent the delivery and quality of CTE has not gone unnoticed, and you have much to be proud of. The 3 cohorts have 11 academy sites, which include over 40 districts and schools. Cohort 1 sites were Lee County and the Trailblazer Academy. Cohort 2 included the sites of Four Rivers Career Academy, Breathitt County, Clinton County, Logan County, Mason County, and Nelson County. And finally, Cohort 3 sites were Campbellsville Independent and the Ignite Academy. In addition to the regional academy approach, the New Skills for Youth grant has made a lasting impact on the work of CTE in Kentucky. The grant has brought the day-to-day work of secondary CTE to life, and many do not realize that it was because of this transformational grant that brought about necessary change over the last 3 years. It has created lasting partnerships between, between other state agencies, employer partners, and post-secondary institutions. This has allowed for stronger alignment of programs, policies, and strategies, plans for education and workforce. The program redesign of the New Teacher Institute, NTI, was included in the New Skills for Youth work and has resulted in over 90% retention rate of new occupation-based CTE teachers. The grant drove change in pathway offerings at the state and local levels, as the state's labor market information helped drive critical decisions on the phasing out of outdated or misaligned career pathways. New and accelerated models of grade 9 through 14 and 9 through 16 career pathways were developed with a variety of post-secondary partners. Dual credit release increased over 200% thanks to legislation and scholarship opportunities that were advocated for as part of the grant and were integrated into the new pathway models. New graduation requirements and essential skills legislation was passed to ensure more personalized and career-oriented preparation for each and every Kentucky student. Employers at the local level have become a more integral part of the K-12 education system. The New Skills for Youth Academies alone have engaged over 120 new employer partners as a result of the regional employer engagement sessions and grant planning teams. The two largest school districts in the state have begun the transformation of wall-to-wall career academies, impacting a large number of potential CTE students. A new branding and marketing initiative for CTE has been launched to improve the communication and perception of CTE to all stakeholders, including students, parents, employers, policymakers, and school leaders. While the New Skills for Youth grant funding has now come to an end, you can see that the critical work of this grant continues to push CTE forward. We are proud of our progress, and we are eager to continue the important work and the foundation that has been built through the New Skills for Youth. The staff in the Office of Career and Technical Education led the development of the new Kentucky Academic Standards for Career Studies and Financial Literacy. The standards have been adopted and are now available at kystandards.org. These standards replace the previous vocational studies standards. The standards are organized in grade bands and the following domains: essential skills, careers, and financial literacy. Beginning with the entering ninth grade class of the 2020-2021 school year, successful completion of one or more courses or programs that meet the financial literacy standards shall be a high school graduation requirement. There are numerous resources available on our website to support the implementation of the standards. For more information about these standards, please contact Teresa Rogers. The Kentucky Department of Education's Tech Ready Apprentices for Careers in Kentucky, are affectionately known as TRAC, Youth Apprenticeship and Youth Pre-Apprenticeship programs, began in 2013 and have seen steady growth every year, with the 2019-2020 school year being the largest yet for participation. Additionally, the Youth Apprenticeship program expanded this year into non-traditional occupations such as general insurance associate, teacher aide, healthcare, and information technology. For the 2019-2020 school year, 76 students were enrolled in youth apprentices. The pre-apprenticeship career pathways in Carpentry had over 1,100 students enrolled, and electrical had over 1,200 enrollments. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 situation, only a small number of students were able to successfully complete the end of program assessment. In comparison, during 2018-19 school year, over 280 carpentry students and over 60 electrical students successfully passed the end of program assessment. Dual credit is growing in Kentucky in a big way. There were over 80,000 unique total dual credit enrollments, and over 30% of those were CT enrollments, which is an increase of over 25% over 2018-2019 enrollments. There were 32 plus post-secondary institutions partnering to offer CTE dual credit in over 158 districts with students enrolled in CTE dual credit, including the Kentucky Tech District. Wow, what a year. Today's meeting may be more important than any other year because of our current situation, not only working with the usual protocols, but challenges under the current circumstances and, of course, the unknown. Work-based learning was a top priority coming into this year, and the COVID-19 has not slowed that work down at all. We have continued working on employer engagement strategies with the KWIB, the state chamber through the talent pipeline management system. Even though this environment has not been conducive for work-based learning expansion, we believe we are creating an environment where more opportunities will be available. I want to recognize the Office of Career and Technical Education staff for planning these PD events. While not having the in-person networking component we all love, these programs are still rich with great professional learning opportunities. I also want to thank Mike and Chris Stone and the KACTE board for working through this difficult process and providing the award ceremony opportunity last week. By the way, congratulations to all of those winners. Thank you for your support with this week's training. Thank you for what you're doing for our schools. And in closing, please know that we have been working hard to make sure the students and teachers have the resources necessary to fully engage in rich career and technical education program. I hope you enjoy this experience and have a great year. And I'll turn it back over to you, Carla and Lee.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and doing well. We all are having a trying time, but as David said, things are moving on for us in career and technical education. I really wanted to start today with a couple of things you may or may not know. The Kentucky State Perkins Plan was approved by the U.S. Department of Ed, so we are legal now, and I'm thrilled with that. That was a big lift, and I can't thank everybody enough for those that helped us get through that time. July 1 truly starts the implementation of Perkins 5. And so because our transition year, we fell back on the Perkins 4 legislation. So July 1 was our big start date, folks. So that's what I'm going to do today is I'm going to kind of start getting us acclimated with some of the changes that we are going to have to take hold of and embrace through Perkins 5 if we want to spend our money. As you all know, we have to have a comprehensive local needs assessment, and that needs assessment has to direct how we spend Perkins funds. But also part of that same sentence in the law says not only do we have to have a comprehensive needs assessment, but we have to meet the state definition of size, scope, and quality. So for our, in our state plan, we developed what those definitions would be for size, scope, and quality. These will take effect. Part of them have taken effect now, but they will take effect full force with the 21-22 Perkins applications. But please don't wait until July or until May 1 of next year when your Perkins application is going to be due and start working on that because these things are going to take some work. So our definition of size is you must have one complete program of study for each program area. So if you only have one program area in your school, you have to have one program of study. If you have three, you have to have three complete programs of study. And when I'm talking about a program area, I'm talking about if you have pathways in agriculture and business and family and consumer science, you would have to have a complete program of study for each of those areas. You might not have to have it for each of the pathways in that area, but you would have to have it for at least one in each of those areas. We are developing a tool within TEDS that this information will go into. It will be hopefully live. Kylie and Scott and Claude have told me that they will do that for me, that it will go live when the Perkins application opens next year. So you will be able to put those programs of study in TEDS, and you will get the immediate approval. As I said, please don't wait and start this next year when the application is due. You need to go on and start working with your secondary and post-secondary folks now. You will need a signed or an approved document at the secondary and post-secondary level. And the definition of size is not just for secondary or not just for post-secondary. It is for both. So this is in our state plan, and this is what we've said we would do. Okay, Golly. The next section is scope. You have to have a definition, or you have to meet our definition of scope. And that is your program of study must lead to an industry recognized credential or an articulated credit. You must have opportunities for dual credit or work-based learning. It can be, your dual credit can be the academic dual credit or the technical dual credit. And the work-based learning is the aspects that are in our work-based learning manual. If at the secondary side, if you are doing one of the programs of study that are outlined in our program areas page, they already lead to either an industry recognized certification or an articulated credit. So you're good with this part. Now, if you are developing a brand new program of study, something that is not part of that, then you will have to make sure that you connect with the scope of the program of study. And the third part is quality. Now, the quality definition is broken down between secondary and post-secondary. So I'll start out talking about our secondary qualifications. They must be of sufficient size, and that is a sequence of 4 or more credits, technical credits. So you have to have those 4 credits. And remember, in our definition that the definition in the law says course, but in Kentucky, we defined a course as a credit. So if you are on a semester or trimester schedule and only have half credits, then you have to have 4 credits. You must have that secondary to post-secondary connection. That leads to dual credit or dual enrollment. If you are doing a locally approved program of study, then your post-secondary partner needs to sign off on that. And your industry certification needs to be an approved industry certification. It has to be on that industry certification list. You have to have an active advisory council. That means they have to meet twice a year. You need to have those members there and be able to show those members, show who was at your meetings. You have to have a certified or an appropriately endorsed teacher. And I will tell you all, when we put this in, I was thinking, well, doesn't everybody? But it just seems lately, and I don't know if it's because of COVID or what, but my understanding is that there are some districts that are wanting to do some virtual courses that are not going to have certified teachers. To be able to use Perkins Funds, you have to have that certified teacher. You have to have an aligned co-curricular student organization. You have to have a CTSO. So if you have your business program, like I talked about earlier, you need to have either DACA or FBLA. You need to have FCCLA and FFA, TSA, HOSA for your health programs. They need to align, and you need to have that. And the final thing for quality at the secondary level is that your programs of study need to be supported by labor market data. We can't just go out and have programs of study that are underwater basket weaving. We need to support what we need by our industries in our regions and in our areas. At the post-secondary level, they need quality is the programs of study need to have a post-secondary credential that is a recognized industry certification. They must have the progression from secondary to post-secondary to employment, like I talked about for secondary, and they have to have an active advisory council. I know I've gone through these very quickly. I will tell you that they are on the Perkins page on the KDE website if you want to pull them up and take a closer look at these. This is what we are planning to do, is have a series of trainings on truly implementing Perkins 5. We will start those trainings this fall. We'll start, since we're not there in person, we're not doing our new coordinators meeting. So that will be our first training probably in September, and I'll get that date out to everybody. And then we'll go from there and build on those trainings so everybody will be ready to really launch your application in the spring of 21. And that's all I have. Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am here to tell you that Ms. Tipton has advised me that unlike the past couple of years, not all applications have been approved in GMAP. We really need you to get these applications approved as soon as possible. The thing you need to realize, there are no retroactive dates for these funds. So even though these funds were available July 1, if your application has not yet been approved, you are unable to use any of the 2021 funds until your application is approved in GMAP. So you need to be getting this done. Next slide. So for those of you who do have your applications approved, next month, Carla will send you an email when the revised allocations are uploaded in GMAP. If you recall, when you submitted your applications and they were approved, it was based on previous year's allocations so that we could go on and get the approval process completed. So all you'll need to do then when this happens, you'll need to go in and amend your budgets for the updated allocation. So anytime you see that you're needing this, you need to go in and do that. I will let the folks who have not received their applications being approved yet, if you do not have these applications approved before this is done, you run the risk of having to start the process from scratch. So if your application is approved, you're going to be able just to amend the budget. So keep that in mind, and if you have not got your application approved, please hear that you may have to start the process from scratch. Okay, next slide. So We don't know how things will go for this year, but if things go as usual or what we see now, the last date to amend your 2021 Perkins plans in the budget will be April 30th of 2021. That's if things hold steady right now. Next slide. So let's revisit the 2019-2020 Perkins Funds. If you remember, back earlier in the spring, you were granted an extension on your 1920 and your carry forward funds. What you need to remember is there is one quick deadline coming up. If you need to make an amendment to your budget for those funds, August 1st is your deadline. Yes, that's Saturday. So keep that in mind. You have until August 1st to make any amendments to your 1920 and your carry forward funds. So for school districts, you need to remind your finance folks that the deadline to request through the federal cash request for 1920 and the carry forward funds is September 30th. Now they need to keep in mind, and so do you, that if you're going to use these two pots of funding, the items must be received by August 31st, or activities have to occur by August 31st for any of these funds to be used. And remember that we cannot reimburse for any items that are encumbered. So again, please share some of these timelines with your finance offices so we don't skip up and find out that, oh, I forgot about this. So please be diligent in working with your district finance offices to make sure this happens. Okay, next slide. So we've been having several questions about the industry certification funds for free and reduced lunch students. I'll be quite honest with you right now, we're not sure at this time if the funds will be available for that purpose. So I would not plan on right now that being an option. However, with anything that we've talked about with Perkins, if there are going to be any extensions, any changes to timelines, or if we see that there will be a small pot of funds available for industry certs, we'll keep you updated throughout the year. So please, if you have any questions about what Carla has discussed or about some of the timelines that we've just discussed, please be sure to send those to the Go Soapbox so we'll get your questions answered after we take a break.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, David. Before we go to break, I am going to answer a few of the questions since we finished that first part so quickly. And by the way, feel free to keep sending questions to app.gosoapbox.com. CTE virtual is the access code, all one word, no spaces, CTE virtual. We will answer the questions after each break, but if we happen to finish a little early like we did this one, I will address these questions before the break. So have a couple questions on here right now. Before I answer any of the questions, I would like for the person who sent the virtual question in to give a few more details about how that's going to look so that we can make a more educated answer on the question that's being asked. So if are you referring to a fully online class where the student is doing it through the computer? Is it more like a Babbel approach where the teacher is working with the student but not at the exact same time that the student's on there? Is it that the student is taking the class but the teacher is available throughout the day to answer questions for the class? Just a few more details like that on that question so that we can answer that a little bit better. Some really easy answers to some of the questions that we've received. Can we get the PowerPoint for today's training? The PowerPoint and the training itself are being, the training's being recorded, and that will be posted as soon as we have the final version of that. And the PowerPoint will go up on our virtual training website, which I will highlight at the end of this session. Also, go ahead, a prelude or a preview of the very end of this session today. We are going to do an FAQ from this event and post the FAQ online as well. So you'll have all the questions that were asked today. You will have the PowerPoint and you will have the video to refer back to. So all of that will be posted, and we will be sending out a follow-up email to the entire state using all of our distribution lists to make sure that everybody has all the information. We did get a question for Carla. Carla, I deal with Perkins for 3 schools in my district. 2 of the schools have business pathways, ag pathways, and FCS pathways. Does each school need to get 1 approved program of study, or is it 1 approved program of study per program area for the district?
Well, Perkins is a district grant. However, I really believe that if we got audited, an auditor would want to see 1 per school. And I know that's a kind of a roundabout question and a way to answer it. But you would need to fill out your 21 application. You would have to have 1 per program area for each program in the district. However, if you have, let's say, a business admin program in one of the 3 schools and you're doing business marketing in the others and you do a business admin, I would ask you then also to do the business marketing. Hope that helps.
Well, thank you, Carla, for that answer, and thank you guys for the questions. We will go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We will start back up at 1:45 with the next part. So anyone that needs a break for a little bit, we're going to go a little bit early for this, and then we'll start up the next portion a little early as well. So break is until 1:45, and then we will answer some more questions. Thank you. Before I get back started, I failed to do something that was really important at the very beginning of this, and that is to give a shout out to Andy and Megan for working with us to make sure we can show this webcast today, get this webcast recorded and posted after the meeting. So Andy, Megan, you guys are heroes behind the scenes. We really appreciate you guys doing this for us. So thanks a lot. Guys, as we switch back to questions and answers, we want to go back to one of the questions that was asked before the break. And so Carla, if you'll address the required programs of study for the district or for the school, do you mind to address that again?
No, not at all. After I read the question, I think I have a better understanding of what the question was. What we need, if you have business, ag and family and consumer science in all 3 of your schools, and you have a common program of study, then you only have to have 1. If the 3 schools do not have a common program of study, then each of the schools would have to have an approved program of study in each of their program areas. So I hope that makes that a little clearer on what I was trying to say before.
Thank you, Carla. And while I have you on here, do you mind to go ahead and address our computers are very delayed due to COVID right now. Items ordered in May, but they still have ship dates as late as November. What should we do in this scenario?
You would not be able to spend your 1920 funds on those computers. You would have to, you could amend, after we do a reallocation, you could amend your 2021 funds budgets, or, you could purchase something else. Anything purchased for 1920 funds must be in hand or activities complete by August 31. That is not a state regulation. That is a federal reg. When the grant closes, that's when it has to be completed. So I just saw somebody ask me, what about carry forward funds? If you are using the 1819 funds, and this is going to get real confusing, folks, and I'm sorry. This is not something that I would have done, but the federal government granted us a waiver for anybody using 1819 funds. So if you have enough 1819 funds to purchase those computers, then you can pay for them with those funds, because those funds now run to June 30th of 21. But for most of our secondary sites, we do not have that luxury. Most folks don't have that much money left because they went on and spent it, which is what we should have done, because that's when it closed first. So, but if you do have those funds left over, then you can allocate those funds for that. Post-secondary, I know KCTCS, I think they closed those funds out in August as well, though.
And Carla, we just had one more question come through that that I think you'd probably be best to answer. If we're not using Perkins Funds for a pathway, do we need to include it on our application in GMAP? I'm assuming it means GMAP.
I would not, because if you are not using Perkins Funds for that, it cannot count toward any of your Perkins accountability. Therefore, you would not include it.
Thanks, Carla. I think this question on the computers being delayed, we might bring that one up again at the end after we talk about the CARES Act funding, Leslie. So I'll remember to bring this one up again, because I think there's some other options other than Perkins funding that could be used for computers and things. So we did receive several questions about virtual in very similar but yet different ways throughout the break so far. I want to try to address some of that really fast. So you can count virtual credits towards a CTE pathway if it's overseen by a CTE teacher, if the CTE teacher is the teacher of record for that class. So if it's overseen by them, even though it's on the computer, even though it might be through an online software platform, if it's overseen by a CTE teacher, that would not be in question, and that would be allowed to be counted towards the pathway. Some of the other questions that you've asked are very good questions, and during this COVID-19 situation, they're very relevant questions. Leslie Slaughter and I are working on a full virtual CTE guidance document that we will be publishing very soon. I'm hoping that we can get it out to you next week, early next week, that will answer some of that for you. At this time, I cannot answer those questions until we have our legal office review the answers that we've given to that. So hopefully by early next week, you'll have a full virtual guidance document that's been vetted by our legal office and an answer to the other questions that you had around virtual. We've received several questions on things that will be covered in this presentation, so we're not going to address those questions right now, but I promise you as we go throughout the presentation, we will address those questions in the appropriate section of the presentation. So with that, I see industry cert questions, which we will address. I see several questions on work-based learning, which we're going to address. I do not see any other ones. So with that, I am going to move on. We are moving to our next section, which is all about assessments. That's industry certs. and end of program assessments and dual credit. So we will have a multitude of presenters for you. We will start with Sherry Craig, and then she'll turn it over to Tom Thompson, who will then turn it over to Scott Usellis, and then who will turn it back over to me. And so, Sherry, I am going to turn the floor over to you at this point.
Thank you, Kylie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sherry Craig with the Division of Technical Support or Technical Schools and Continuous Improvement in the Office of Career and Technical Education. My responsibilities include coordinating the administration of the CTE assessments offered by OCTE and providing support to districts and schools. I've had the pleasure to work with many of you in the past. However, if this is your first time serving as the assessment coordinator for your district or school, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, again, especially this year. First, I would like to point out that there are two types of CTE assessments offered by the Office of Career and Technical Education at no cost to schools or students. First, the CTE end of program or EOP assessments for articulated post-secondary credit. CTE assessments are state-developed assessments based upon clear, concise standards identified by Kentucky employers and aligned with CTE pathways and associated with statewide articulation agreements with post-secondary partners. Second are the Tech Ready Apprentices for Careers in Kentucky assessments in the skilled trades of carpentry and electrical, which are a component of the valid industry certification. The track program creates post-secondary opportunities with registered apprenticeships training providers. After successfully completing a 4-course sequence, safety modules, and end-of-program assessments, students will receive a pre-apprenticeship industry certification, which is highly favored for an interview with partnering organizations. And OCTE periodically requests schools participate in pilot end-of-program assessments in order to field test items for new or revised pathway standards with an EOP. These CTE assessments are offered in person utilizing an online testing platform called ESAS. At this time, there are no options to administer these assessments virtually. Each district assessment coordinator and assigned CTE end-of-program assessment coordinator is provided an ESAS administrator account for access to test tickets and performance results. Today, I'll be sharing some upcoming makeup testing options for EOP and track assessments and plans for pilot CTE EOP testing this fall. Next slide,
Sherry,
please. Yes.
Do you mind if I break in here before you start talking about the makeup assessments?
Sure.
And I apologize for cutting in, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from school districts very concerned with doing any sort of makeup testing that requires anything in person. And I do understand that situation, and I understand that COVID-19 has made things very difficult. But what we don't want to do is close the door on these graduates from last year who, you know, totally outside of their own control, were not able to take these assessments. These assessments lead to college credit in many cases, or even up to a year of their apprenticeship being taken care of. And to provide them with no makeup option at all it's tough, guys. And I know we're walking a fine line between the COVID-19 situation and trying to do what's right for kids. But I strongly encourage you not to close the door on these makeup options. Leave some door open for these kids to be able to come back in and take these assessments if they want to, only if they want to. But if they want to, and especially if it's going to earn them college credit or apprenticeship credit, let's please leave the door open to some possibility for these kids to be able to make up tests. Sherry, I'm sorry to cut in on you, but I just had to say that message.
No, thank you for adding that. So as you all know, the 2019-20 EOP assessment testing window closed March 13th due to statewide closures related to the COVID-19. Results were released for those that were able to test prior to the March 13th closure. The results were released April the 16th. You may refer to the 2019-20 CTE EOP assessment state report that's posted on the KDU website. Districts and assessment coordinators and EOP assessment coordinators do have access to performance results and certificates in ESAS. Underclass students who tested and met benchmark will count going forward. Senior students who tested and met benchmark should have already received their CTE EOP assessment results and certificate for articulated credit. Also, you may refer to the statewide articulation agreements link on KD website for a complete, and provided here in the PowerPoint, for a complete list of and copy of articulation agreements that are associated with end-of-program assessments. And some good news, new in 2020, the EOP assessments are now available on student transcripts, including e-transcripts and high school transcripts. Next slide, please, Kylie. The EOP assessments, we are offering makeup testing this fall. Again, this is 2019 seniors or early grads. Makeup testing is tentatively planned for the fall of 2020 if in-person classes are in session or permitted. Districts may select from 3 makeup testing window options: August 3rd to the 7th, September 7th through the 11th, or October 12th through the 16th. Please refer to this communication that was previously submitted to DACs and assessment coordinators of how to register your school or district for those testing windows. I've received questions like, who is eligible? Again, it's only the 2019-20 seniors or early grads who received a test ticket in the spring of 2020 and did not test are eligible. So we're talking about students that have already graduated. Districts and schools are responsible for scheduling and administering and proctoring the in-person assessments. New test tickets have been generated and are eligible for eligible students at their home high schools, and those tickets are now available in ESES. Next slide, please, Kylie. The 2019, continuing with the fall makeup testing, all assessments are offered during the makeup testing window shall be administered in person at the student's home high school or district designated testing site under the student's home high school, and proctored pursuant to the Administrative Code for Kentucky's Educational Assessment Program and inclusion of special populations in the state required assessment and accountability programs. Also adhere to the Healthy at Work or school guidance, including the COVID-19 plan for reopening secondary career and technical facilities for completion of industry certifications and lab-based dual credit coursework. As Kylie said, schools and districts are encouraged to strongly encouraged to make this opportunity available to any 2019-20 senior or early grad who is interested, as the successful passing of these assessments provide opportunities for post-secondary articulated credit and advancement within the workforce. Makeup testing assessments will not be reported or included within the schools or district's accountability. Again, this is not for schools accountability, it's for the students. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the 2019 Pilot EOP Assessments are planned for the fall of 2020, October 19th through the 30th to be exact, if in-person classes are in session or permitted, since we were not able to conduct the pilot testing last year. 6 pilots are planned. There are 2 revised, accounting and financial services, and 4 new assessments, pilot assessments, automation engineering, civil engineering, engineering design, and mechanical design. Note, upon a successful pilot, these assessments are planned to be available in the spring of 2021. However, a minimum number of students must participate in order to make this happen, and pilot assessment results will not be provided. The purpose is for field testing the assessment items. For pilot assessments, the same assessment instructions and security applies as in the CTE assessments. Please refer to the CTE assessment coordinator and test administrator manuals for more information. Again, these assessments must be administered in person, and the teacher of record shall not administer the pilot assessments or the assessments, and students will have up to 2 hours to complete the pilot assessments. And all the assessment regulation training is required for all individuals participating in assessment administration. And again, refer to the Healthy at Work schooling guidance. Next, the skilled trades track assessments of carpentry and electrical. A reminder, the track assessments only apply to schools that have skilled trade track pathways. The 2019 skilled trade track assessment testing window also closed March 13th. due to statewide school closures related to COVID-19. Assessment results were released for students that tested prior to the March 13th testing window closure, and district assessment coordinators and track assessment coordinators have access to performance results in ESS, and students received immediate results for track assessments. Underclass students who tested and met benchmark on the assessment will count going forward, and senior students who tested and met benchmark, again, should have already received their performance results as a component of the valid track industry certification. Students must complete other requirements in an application to earn the track industry certification. For track certification information, you may refer to the Skilled Trades Track Pre-Apprenticeship Completion Form. The link is provided here for instructions, or contact Mary Taylor at KDE with questions regarding track. Per Mary, I would note that considering the circumstances, this form may be submitted with just a school level signature this year. Next slide, please, Kylie. Next, the track makeup testing is also tentatively planned for the fall of 2020 if in-person classes are in session or permitted. It's the same, districts may select from the same 3 testing window options as for EOP assessments, and it's only for 2019 senior early graduates who received a test ticket in the spring and did not test are eligible. However, track assessments do have a retest option. If a student did not meet benchmark on their first attempt, then a retest option is available for track if the student requests it. Districts and schools are also responsible for scheduling and administering the in-person assessments for track. And again, the new test tickets were generated for eligible students at their home high schools. The same as for EOPs. All assessments offered during the makeup testing window, again, shall be administered in person, home high school, or a district designated testing site under the student's home high school, and proctored pursuant to the admin code for Kentucky's Education Assessment Program, and exclusion of special populations and state required assessments and accountability programs. Important note though for track, if applicable, district assessment coordinators and home high school CTE EOP assessment coordinators or track assessment coordinators may coordinate with their ATCs and CTCs to obtain any necessary assessment materials for track assessments, especially the electrical, which requires the NEC reference book for testing. You may refer to the Skills Trades Track Carpentry and Skills Trades Track Electrical web pages for additional assessment information. Also, a link's been provided here at the top of the slide for carpentry and electrical that'll take you there as well. Again, schools and districts are strongly encouraged to make this opportunity available for any eligible 2019 senior or early grad who is interested. Even though the certificate is not needed for district accountability, it still holds substantial value for students now and in the future, with potential employers in regards to higher wages and up to a year's credit, enabling them to bypass the first year of their apprenticeship. And a reminder that the track assessments, the makeup testing will not be reported or included within the school's district's accountability. And then finally, to recap, here are the dates that are planned for makeup testing and pilot EOP testing. Of course, the situation continues to evolve. Please refer to or continue to visit the end of program assessment webpage and skilled trade track web pages for more information, or contact me if I can be of any of assistance. At this time, the plan is to offer spring testing, but we'll have to see how it goes. More dates and information will be shared as it becomes available. As they say, we'll get through this together. Tom, to you, or Kylie.
Hey, thanks, Sherry. So just real quick, I'd like to cover some of the June 29th guidance for reopening secondary career and technical education spaces for industry certification and dual credit. Like I said, it was originally released on the 29th. It was shared with the superintendent's webcast on June 30th. There's still time to do this. If you haven't had a chance to get this guidance in your hand, it's on the KDE COVID-19 webpage under the reopening guidance. Just some of the highlights of it. This was the creation of career and technical education administrators from locally controlled centers and area technology centers We created a small work group. They took some feedback from some of the things that they were doing, plus feedback and concerns from their teachers. And we created this document, and then it was vetted through the Department of Health and then the governor's office. And so this is the official document for reopening. I won't go through every little thing on it, but just some of the highlights. The document is broken down into 4 main categories: general requirements, arrival and dismissal, transition between classrooms and labs, and then there's some area-specific guidance that's broken into classroom labs, computer labs, and then the CTE lab areas. Just a few highlights. When thinking about opening your center for these particular things, if you've created a plan, then I would ask that you get your local health department to review your plan. If you haven't already done so and you're in the process of it, then I would ask that your health department be a part of that. Of course, like Sherry said earlier, that we're looking for the preference be given to the graduates of 1920. It's not an accountability issue, but it is an issue for those students that this may be the piece that gets them into that career, or this may be the thing that gives them that raise, or this may be the time that you can help them finish up that dual credit to earn that credit. So, like I said, we're asking that those 1920 graduates are the ones you focus on. Within the guidance, you'll see a lot of links to the Healthy at Work guidance and some of the Kentucky COVID-19 webpage for different things throughout it. So you can just click on that link and it'll go. And the guidance includes a lot of information about social distancing, personal protective equipment as far as masks are concerned, but also PPE as it relates to the program area, and then sanitation. And again, I'd like to just point out that document can be found on the KDE COVID-19 website under opening. Scott, I think you're next.
Scott Uselis, the data manager for the Office of Career and Technical Education. And I apologize for that hiccup there, but kind of switching gears from EOP assessments into industry certifications. So to echo Tom and Kylie and Sherry and everyone else that's spoken already, I just make a plea to please again do think of those class of 2020 graduates, not only for your EOP exams, but also for your industry certifications. As Tom just mentioned, sometimes that is that's the piece that allows that kid to get their foot in the door. So if you have class of 2020 graduates that want to come back and do want to take that industry certification, please do make every effort to do so, to allow them to do that. For those kids, those previously purchased certifications, licensures, vouchers can be used that you purchased for last school year. As I mentioned, graduates can come back and test per the reopening guidance that Tom went over. Moving forward, though, for 2021, some flexibility for how we're going to handle industry certifications. I know this came up in Ghost Soapbox and did want to make sure we're clear about this. A little bit different from last year. So vendor virtual proctoring is allowable if in-person courses are not occurring. So if everyone is on NTI, we are going to allow vendor virtual proctoring for those industry certifications. And related to that, vendor virtual proctoring is allowable if students or parents choose not to send students for in-person courses. So that's if there is in-person coursework happening, parents choose to keep their children home. We are going to let that vendor virtual proctoring industry certification exam occur. The reasoning behind that, why that's a little bit different from the guidance we gave last year, just wanted to speak to that for a minute. In our thinking is that if the vendor is going to stand behind the industry certification that is earned by a student at home, and they're going to stand behind that and give it the stamp of approval, that, again, we are going to allow that to move forward. So, again, that is a little bit different guidance than what we were giving at the end of last school year when COVID first was kind of thrust upon us. Moving on here, Perkins and state free reduced certification CTE funds, if those are available, can be used on virtual proctored industry certifications in those two circumstances. So you may use your funding toward that virtual proctored industry certification exam. And then finally, TEDS data entry will be required for industry certifications that are earned through this process or through normal proctoring. Once again, that is a little bit different than what we were advising last spring, when again COVID was thrust upon us at the end of the school year. Moving forward for this 2021 school year, you do want to make sure that the industry certifications being attempted by students, even if they are virtual, are being logged into TEDS, whether they pass that exam or not. So want to make sure that we get that in TEDS so we can document that. And with that, I will pass it off to Kylie for
Thanks,
some dual
Scott.
credit information.
Appreciate it. So with dual credit this year, I'm going to start out by making a plea to everyone. The most important thing related to dual credit this year is that post-secondary and secondary partners work together and communicate all year long. This is going to probably be a crazy fall for all of us. We are probably going to have some institutions that are open while others are not open. We're probably going to have some close when others don't close. And that means that our partners need to know what's going on. So my first thing is, please, everyone work out communication plans with your post-secondary partners. If you're a post-secondary person, work out your plans with your secondary partners. We really need to keep open lines of communication happening this year more than ever. And I know that you guys have been strengthening those partnerships throughout the years, and that's getting better and better. But in this time, in this fall especially, this is going to be very difficult. And so we all need to talk to each other throughout the semester. Some highlights, I'm not going to read everything to you, but some highlights that I wanted to point out to you here. In House Bill 352, the budget bill, dual credit tuition rate was raised to 40%. I think Leslie might talk more about that in her legislative update, but I wanted to go ahead and point that out to you guys now. A lot of people are still unaware that the tuition rate increased. It was 1/3. It's now 2/5 or 40%. And it doesn't really affect the scholarships, but it does affect those out-of-pocket classes that kids are going to be paying for. So the tuition is going to increase a little bit this year for any of those out-of-pocket courses that are happening. KCTCS is going to be very flexible this fall. They are opening their classes in varying schedules. They're opening it in varying ways. So some of it's fully virtual, some of it's fully online, some of it's a blended approach. I will tell you that every single KCTCS course has been set up with the ability to immediately go to virtual if that's needed. They are requiring Blackboard. That means that anybody that's partnering with KCTCS should be setting up their dual credit courses through Blackboard. That's in the MOA that you're signing with KCTCS. That is a requirement of working with KCTCS. We have to remember that these college classes are not our classes. These classes belong to KCTCS, and we have to follow their policies for offering those dual credit classes. So if you've not done that at this point, please reach out to KCTCS and get that work started. That is very critical and is a requirement of working with them. Just a couple other quick things. We've had the ability to offer year-long dual credit classes in the past. This year, while we're not telling you you can't do that, we are asking that you set up all of your dual credit classes on a semester basis. And that's just because of the situation we're in and the fact that those full year classes could get really confused in a full year schedule with the COVID-19 situation going on. And it's more likely to cause more of those incompletes or in progress grades to be given. So we are asking that you try to set up all your classes on a semester basis. We have a dual credit task force that has been meeting weekly, then bi-weekly, and now monthly to deal with all of the things that are coming up with dual credit. If you have any questions, I ask that you submit those to kdedualcredit@education.ky.gov, or you can just send it directly to me, and I will make sure that goes before our dual credit task force so that we can answer all of those questions for you. We have several new websites for dual credit that have tons of information for you. We have guidance documents, we have FAQs. We have so much information out there for you on the dual credit piece, and we're going to be adding to that constantly this year as the situation changes and gets more clear for us throughout the fall. And so KCTCS does have a welcome back. CPE and the 4 years all have plans in place. There's a website for all of that, and those links will be available for you with this PowerPoint. With that, I am going to switch gears. We're supposed to be taking a break right now, but we are really moving fast through this presentation. So I am going to try to pull up some of these questions and go through some of those. So the very first question, Scott answered this already, but I'm going to ask Scott to come back on here and answer it again. And that is, what about virtual proctoring for industry certs this year, Scott?
Yes, that certainly is allowed. And again, that does deviate a little bit from the guidance we gave last year. But yes, if there is a virtual option for an industry certification exam, yes, absolutely, that is allowable and available to students.
Thanks, Scott. I know that you answered that, but I like to say it multiple times, and I promised if they ask a question, we would answer it during the question and answers. So thanks for covering that again with us. Sherry, we have a question for you about the pilot end of program assessments. They want to know if the students that are eligible to take the pilot had to be a concentrator. Did they need to have two credits completed in order to take that pilot EOP?
Yes, thank you for that question. I should have clarified that earlier. So schools are encouraged to participate if they have eligible students, or meaning that they have a concentrator status in the pathway that's aligned to that pilot EOP.
Thanks, Sherry. And Sherry, do you mind to address just one more time, when will the test tickets be available for the pilot assessments?
The pilot assessments, the test tickets are not available yet. I will send out an update. Again, that's tentatively planned for the end of October, but I will send out an update shortly as soon as those are available.
Thanks, Sherry. One more question on the pilot exams. They want to know about accommodations and if they need to follow all the same accommodations as though it was not a pilot.
Yes, they would offer the accommodations. However, students will have up to 2 hours to complete the pilot assessment.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm reading through these questions really fast to see if there's anything else that I need to cover right now. M&A program. We have a question about the clinical hours needed at a long-term care facility for M&A. David, Pam, or Tom, do either one of you guys want to address the M&A and moving forward with those required clinical hours?
Kylie, what's the question?
So the question is, how are they going to get the students the required clinical hours this fall? Is there flexibility the way there was last spring, where there were multiple ways you could get those hours, or has it gone back to the normal, you can only get it in a long-term care facility?
I've not heard anything about reverting back at this point, but as you so articulated so well before, they need to work with their local institution. So if they're testing at a particular site for their M&A, then I would talk to those people if they're going to be able to do simulated clinicals or even from a work standpoint is another option.
Kylie, I'll chime in on that one also. We have a meeting with KCTCS next week, I believe it is, and guidance will be sent out. So it's important to watch for emails from Elizabeth Bullock or Peggy Williford. And of course, we'll keep that guidance posted on our website as well. But in working with Medicaid services, things do change. So we will definitely keep that guidance updated and communicated out to the teachers and principals.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Pam. I appreciate that. We have another question about the EOP. If we are in a non-traditional instruction setting, can students who are eligible for the EOP take it virtually? I am going to answer this question for Sherry. As of right now, there is no virtual proctored ability for the EOPs, so we would not be able to offer those EOPs virtually. We are continuing to work with our testing partners to look into those types of proctored exams. At this time, that is not possible. Going back to our first section, Carla, we have another question about the Perkins budget. When we do a Perkins budget revision, do we need to be detailed, example, items in the narrative, or can we adjust the total in the category? In other words, does the revision have to show adjustment to the category, object code, and narrative?
I think the answer, from what I'm understanding to that, is yes, to the second part. If you are making a revision and you want to add items to be purchased, we need to know what those items are. So if you are adding a plasma cutter or for your welding program or your ag construction program, then you need to put that in the justification section. Then also your budget would have to be changed as well. And the object code should match what your finance director wants. Those are those Munis object codes. And so that would have to match what the finance director says.
Thanks, Carla. And while I have you on here, we have another question about computers that have been purchased through Perkins funding and whether or not those computers can be assigned to students for virtual learning since they were purchased using Perkins funding.
The easy answer to that is no. The Uniform Grants Guidance basically says that if a non-federal entity is using the funds or using equipment, it affects the life of that equipment and therefore would have to either pay rent on that equipment or just leave it with the non-federal or with the federal entity. So it needs to be staying with a CTE program. Thanks,
Carla. We have a question about whether or not the things that we're talking about are on the KDE website. Most everything that we are saying today is already available on the KDE website or has been sent out through a DAC communication, but everything that we do talk about today will be posted on our virtual training site when the meeting is over. And so the PowerPoint, the links, the information we're sharing, all of that will be available. But the majority of everything that we're talking about is already available on the KDE website, other than a few of the emails that we sent out. And if you contact me, we can forward you those emails that went out before you started. So if you're new and haven't received some of that information, just let me know and we'll go back and make sure you get the DAC communication and the other communications that we've sent out to CTE coordinators. With that, we are going to take a break until 2:40. So we are going to be on break from right now until 2:40. Keep those questions coming. We really appreciate this. This virtual setting is different from us. You guys know how much we love to be there with you in person and talk with you and take these questions throughout the presentations. And so I do appreciate you guys asking questions in this virtual environment. And I'm sorry it can't be more interactive than it is, but we will address any question that you put into the app.gosoapbox.com. If you joined us late, the access code is CTE virtual. Feel free to submit any question that you want through that, and we will be sending out an FAQ at the end of this. So Andy and Megan, we're going to take a break until 2:40, and then we will get started with our third and last section of this. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everybody. This is the third and final section. We're going to answer a few more questions. We didn't get a lot more questions during the break, but we did get a few and some requests to clarify some of our answers a little bit. The first thing I'm going to address is a technical piece. I know that people are telling me that the Teams bar is blocking part of the PowerPoint. That is not in the way I'm presenting. I've been told that what you have to do is click away from the Teams bar and not move your mouse around, or else that Teams bar pops back up again. And so if you're having difficulty seeing that, please click off of the screen and then do not move your mouse a lot, or else that Teams bar will pop right back up on you. I apologize for that difficulty. Scott, we had a clarifying question. I think that there was some confusion about that virtual proctoring and the way I worded some of the information on the virtual proctoring. So can you just go into a little bit more depth on how virtual proctoring works and what they can expect with that?
Sure. Just to be clear, when we say virtual proctoring, that does not mean that you personally have to proctor your students when they're testing. If it's a vendor that offers virtual exams, they're going to have a virtual proctoring platform that they use that'll ensure, that they're taking the test correctly and so on. So it's not something you personally would have to be trained on. That'll be taken care of by the vendor. At least it should be.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. We got a lot of feedback from vendors back in the spring. They very quickly were adjusting to the new COVID environment, and most of the vendors were sending out messages to school districts about how to use their virtual proctoring services. A lot of them are using that ProctorU for their virtual proctoring, but typically, and in every case that I've seen, I can't vouch for every single one, but in all the cases I've seen, that virtual proctoring is handled through the vendor, as Scott talked about. So I appreciate that, Scott. Thanks for clarifying that and bringing that to my attention as well during the break. We did get some questions about clarifying the use of computers purchased with Perkins funding and how long before they can move that computer to some other environment other than CTE, and just clarifying our comments about assigning those computers to a student during this COVID time. So Carla, do you mind to just jump back on and add to that just a little bit for us?
Okay. There is strict guidelines about how long a item and must be used in the program, or how it must be used. And actually, there's guidelines on how, if it is no longer being used in the program that it is purchased for, then where it is to go next. It can't be just, I purchased something with my Perkins funds, I keep it 6 months, and then I move it someplace else. There are very strict guidelines on that. As long as the item is relevant for the program, whether it is a piece of equipment, a computer, whatever, then it stays with that program. If it is no longer relevant in that particular program, so let's say it's no longer relevant in a business program, but it would be relevant in a business program in a middle school, then it goes there next. It would not be able to be moved to a non-federal funded program until all the other avenues are taken care of. So if whomever asked that question, if they would like to email me, I have some guidance, written guidance, and I'll be glad to send that out.
Thanks, Carla. So it turns out that I completely lied to all of you guys about the technology issue and Teams bar. That was on our end. I'm so sorry about that. Get on there and tell somebody that it's not my fault, and it turns out to be my fault. So I apologize to everybody, but our technical staff took care of that for me. So once again, I appreciate them taking care of us today. Scott, we got another clarifying question about virtual proctoring, and they wanted to know if we know if there is an additional cost for the virtual proctoring. I have not seen any additional cost for the virtual proctoring. Okay, so
No,
most of the vendors want you to use their products, and so they're not charging
right.
an additional fee for that during this COVID-19 time.
Yeah, I can speak to Certiport that uses ProctorU, as you'd mentioned before. I know there's no additional cost, and they're one of the largest vendors. So I would be surprised if there was any additional cost.
Thanks, Scott. Tom, we got a question about students to teacher ratio numbers and how social distancing is going to affect that. I don't know if you want to address that today or if you would prefer to address that in the ATC meeting that you're having later this week.
I can address it in it, and it'll be based on individual cases for each ATC.
Thank you. And we will include that question in our FAQ as well after Tom addresses it so that we can put that in our official guidance for everybody. I see once again we have a few questions that we've not addressed here, but those questions will be addressed in this next section or are appropriate to answer after we go into this next section. So I am going to move on and we are going to go into our legislative update. And folks, normally when we do these CTE summer programs, part of these programs is all about trying to convince you to do more CTE and to show you how great our data is and everything. I still would stand behind CTE data and tell you how great that data is, but we've had so many changes due to the COVID-19 situation and due to new legislation that we really need to spend a good portion of the time we have left addressing the guidance and the legislation that's come out recently. And so Leslie Slaughter is going to address those different bills that have come out, how that affects us, and how we are going to move forward. And this is a lot of changes, guys. And so I ask you to bear with us. Leslie's great, and she's going to talk you through all of this stuff. But we did have a lot of changes in legislation this year, in addition to the COVID-19 situation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie. Leslie, I appreciate you covering this with us because I know it's a lot, and we went through a lot with this. So.
Well, I think we always have a cram-packed agenda for the coordinator session. So this is no different, just in a different environment. So good afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Leslie Slaughter, and I am the executive advisor for our Office of Career and Technical Education. So I'm going to spend a few moments just talking with you about some of the outcomes from the 2020 General Assembly legislative session, talk to you a little bit about some federal congressional legislation that is helping our COVID efforts, and then some of the things that are going on across the agency and within our office to continue to support you through COVID. So I'm going to start with just outcomes from the General Assembly, the Kentucky General Assembly. So we wrapped our legislative session April 15th of 2020. And so the first bill I want to spend just a few moments talking about is Senate Bill 101 from Senator Wilson, Mike Wilson from Bowling Green. This is a bill that will have a very positive effect on our CTE students and programs. It deals with articulation agreements. So as you know, and you've already heard in this session today, we have been at the articulation game for a very long time. We have a lot of articulation agreements in place, particularly for our end of program assessments related to the various pathways. So this bill actually requires the Council on Post-Secondary Education to facilitate a process that is going to help us develop and implement more of a statewide approach to those articulation agreements. So this has to be in place by next summer. So we have an entire year to work behind the scenes on building this out. But this bill will require CPE, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, to work with all of the public colleges and universities to collaborate with us for every approved career pathway we have in Kentucky that leads to that post-secondary credential, certificate, license, or degree, and to come up with standardized criteria for these agreements. So again, we already have many agreements in place, but right now the individual institutions kind of get to negotiate what those terms within the MOAs are. This is going to kind of consolidate that process a little bit more and give the student more opportunity to determine where they take that articulation. So it is going to allow the student to be awarded the credit for prior learning at any public college or university. So more information will be coming over the next year. We've already reached out to CPE and started the collaborative process of beginning to think about how we coordinate these efforts. But again, they are actually in charge of the process. We will be supporting them as a partner in the work, and there will be lots of information in the coming months on this particular bill. Next slide, Callie. So as we begin discussions on House Bill 352, which is the state's executive branch budget bill, I want to set up a little context for you because we did have a lot of provisions within the budget bill that impact CTE, and particularly our area technology centers and our locally operated centers. So as you all are probably aware, beginning last summer at the request of the State Board of Education, the General Assembly did establish a legislative task force, and Associate Commissioner Horstman spoke to that in his remarks at the beginning of this session. They began meeting in July of last summer. They met through the fall months several times, and they were really tasked with looking at alternative ways to fund and also creating new governance structures for all of secondary CTE. There were a lot of great meetings and discussions that took place, and the intent was for them to make recommendations to the Interim Joint Committee on Education in November so that there would be some potential recommendations in place moving into the General Assembly and the legislative session in January. Unfortunately, the task force did not arrive at consensus on particular recommendations to make, and so we kind of entered into the legislative session not knowing what might come from some of that legislative task force work. So House Bill 352 again establishes the state budget. It is interesting that this year, instead of having a typical 2-year budget like normal, we actually only have a 1-year budget because, as you know, COVID kind of came in and hijacked things in the middle of the legislative session. And so out of an abundance of caution, they chose to adopt only a 1-year budget, not knowing what this next year may bring in terms of revenue and expenses. So they will have to still adopt a year 2 budget of this biennium, either in the next regular session that starts in January, or they could possibly still have a special called session by the governor. We don't know what will happen there. But there are some major provisions in this bill, this 1-year budget bill, that do impact a lot of CTE. So Kylie, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll begin addressing some of those provisions. So within the learning and results services category, we refer to that category of the budget bill as LARS. There was some new language around local districts who want to petition to assume control of a state-operated area technology center. So as you know, we have state-operated ATCs, we have locally operated CTCs, or what we call LAVEX, and then we also have comprehensive middle and high school CTE programs. So these provisions deal with a local board of education or a district who's wanting to assume control of a state-operated ATC. Specifically, there was some budget language in there that says that if a petition is granted to that local board of education, they would receive 100% of the funding for that area technology center's budget in year 1. And then in year 2, the local board would receive not less than 75% of the budget that had been allocated the previous year. So this language does differ from previously existing statute language that did have some provisions that were much different than these funding provisions. It actually said that the district would receive the ATC's budget for 1 year, and then they would go into the LAVEC pot of money, which, as you all know, is a much smaller supplemental source of funding for our locally operated career and technical centers. The remaining 25% of the year 2 budget that gets shaved off for that local board of education is now supposed to go into what we're calling a side pot of funding that will help to support our locally operated centers that receive the LAVEC funding. So there is going to be some new revenue over time that will begin to generate for the locally operated centers, because through the task force work, that became abundantly clear that the funding for LAVECs was not sufficient at this time. We also were very pleased with a provision in the bill that allowed for, or required, I guess I should say, the local board who was assuming control of the ATC to have an interlocal agreement with any of the current feeder districts. So any district that had access to that center would continue to have student access to that center moving forward, which we thought was a very critical and thoughtful provision in terms of equitable access to high quality CTE programming. Callie, next slide. There were also some personnel provisions within the budget bill related to these ATC transfers that does differ from some existing statutory language that had been used for previous transfers. And the new language essentially says that any certified employee, a principal, or classified employee may be granted a continuing service contract upon the effective date of the transfer. Previous language that was not withstood said that the employees would be kept for 1 year and then they may be offered a continuing service contract. So this language here does differ. In terms of anyone who has petitioned at this point, we've had 3 petitions from local districts that have been received by the commissioner. 2 of those have been formally granted. The 3rd is under legal review at this time. Kylie, next slide. Kylie's already touched on this piece of the budget bill, but we wanted to reiterate that there, again, is dual credit language around the scholarships in the budget bill. Specifically, there is an increase in the tuition ceiling rate. It went from 1/3 to 2/5, so from approximately 33% to 40%. As Kylie said, for students who are on scholarship, they are not going to feel the effects of that particular change. There is, I think, an increase in the allocation for the dual credit scholarship that was put into the House Bill 352 that would cover the difference for KIA to be able to still administer those scholarships at the new and higher rate. But students who are taking additional dual credit courses out of pocket, maybe they've exhausted all of their scholarships, whatever the case may be, they would see the increase in that tuition ceiling. We wanted to make you aware as well that KIA has made some adjustments to how they're going to facilitate the dual credit scholarships. So as you know, there are 2 different dual credit scholarships for our students. There is the traditional dual credit scholarship that offers the 2 courses over the junior or senior year. And then there was the Work Ready dual credit scholarship that provides 2 courses per year starting the freshman year. So there is still the same number of scholarships available to students, but they're going to be administered under one general umbrella now rather than as 2 separate scholarships. So that's more of an administrative change. You all won't really see or feel the effects of that much, but wanted to make you aware that there may be some change in language from KIA that you may see on that. And then again, we were really pleased that there were some provisions in the budget bill that protected students who were enrolled in dual credit courses in the spring of 2020 to basically hold them harmless if they were not able to successfully complete a dual credit course as a result of COVID-19, particularly if the new course delivery method was not available to them. Maybe they didn't have internet access at home or they didn't have technology. Then there was some flexibility there to allow students to be able to retake those courses and utilize the scholarship again to do that. So we were really pleased with that provision in the budget bill. House Bill 352 did also have some LAVEC language. For those of you that received LAVEC funding, there was an additional $200,000 that was appropriated for the LAVECs within the 2021 budget. But there was some language attached to that allocation that basically restricts those funds to a district who enrolls students in a state-operated ATC that is physically located within a different time zone. So the only district at this time that meets that definition and therefore is eligible for this funding is Taylor County. So that funding will go to them for the Central Kentucky Career Academy. And then there was also a change from previous language that allows the commissioner to add locally operated centers to the LAVEC formula that have been established after June 21st, 2001. So again, that authority is given to the commissioner to do that. I think all of us are still in a place where we have concerns about the reality of that funding and how far it can be stretched. And so with a new commissioner coming on board in a few weeks, we will begin discussions with Dr. Glass, the new Commissioner of Education, about the LAVEC funding and continue those discussions as far as what his authority is and what we recommend that he continue to do. We did have a concern moving into the fall semester around our locally operated funding source. So the regulation that guides the LAVEC formula does specify, as you are aware, that a local district receives a tentative allocation for the upcoming year by June 30th annually. And that is based on the previous year's program offerings and those FTE enrollments in each of those programs. And then what we do by January 1st of that next semester, we provide a final allocation that is adjusted based on the current year data. And that takes into account, of course, any new programs and new enrollments. As you all know that are in the process of that LAVEC formula, those mid-year adjustments can cause some major hits for some of you. And so we pursued a waiver with the State Board of Education at a special called meeting earlier this month that is going to allow us to waive Section 5.2 that you see there and that mid-year adjustment. So we will be proceeding with giving you your full year budget based on the allocation that was provided by June 30th, and we will not be pursuing the mid-year adjustment. And, you know, we also know that moving into this next semester, your enrollments were likely to look a lot different anyways, just really not knowing the reality that we're faced at this time with how many students will be in person, if at all. And so that is another reason why we felt like that the waiver was really critical and necessary. And so we are proud to support our LAVECs in that waiver. Transition readiness. Okay, so Senate Bill 158 provided a lot of changes to the state accountability system and high school graduation requirements. So there will be changes to the new accountability system, the newest accountability system, that will be coming as a result of Senate Bill 158 and some of the language within that bill. Of course, that will have to be approved by the State Board of Education because the accountability system is specified in its own accountability regulations. So there will be changes that will be taken to the State Board of Education in the coming months to revise that regulation to reflect the changes that are expected from Senate Bill 158 from the 2020 session. Information right now is being compiled and will be released from the KDE Office of Assessment and Accountability. And if you want to tune into the next August State Board meeting, there will be a pretty extensive presentation from that office on specifically what the changes are that are required as a result of the bill and what will be coming as a result of that. So be looking for more information to come. We obviously know that with state accountability from this past year, you know, we were fortunate that the United States Department of Education allowed for us to waive formal accountability. We know that possibility may exist for the year 2021, but at this time, no decisions have been made. I believe there might be one or two states that have already requested waivers to the United States Department of Education. Kentucky is not one of those at this time. So I think we'll have to wait and see what transpires over the next couple of months before we have a better idea as far as what state accountability will look like in terms of what will be reported and you will be held accountable for this 2021 year. We get a lot of questions about career readiness versus federal Perkins accountability, and we want to just draw your attention to the fact that those are not identical indicators. So please make sure as coordinators and as leaders in your building that you are very familiar with what is built into our post-secondary readiness or transition readiness accountability at the state level, as well as what the federal Perkins plan calls for in terms of our indicators of accountability. So for example, dual credit is not included in the federal Perkins accountability, only industry certs and end of program assessments. But as you know, dual credit is a measure of transition readiness in the current state accountability system. So we know those can be very confusing, and we just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that those indicators are not identical, and you should definitely be aware of where they differ. At this time, schools will be held accountable for Perkins federal accountability in the 2021 year, much like the remainder of all other aspects of federal accountability. That is subject to change based on how things transpire over the next couple of months. But right now, as of this time, we are being told that schools will be held accountable for federal Perkins accountability. The last piece that we want to draw your attention to related to our state accountability system is related to the exceptional work experience indicator. That is an indicator that has previously existed in our post-secondary readiness or transition readiness accountability, formerly what we refer to as college and career readiness accountability. That was a new indicator that was built into this most recent iteration of the accountability system based on language that is within Senate Bill 158. It will no longer be allowed to be included in transition readiness. It will be removed because legally it has to be, because it is prevented from being included as a measure in our state's accountability system. So you should be aware that that indicator is going away. Again, it will take a few months for that to go through the promulgation process of revising our regulations, but the Senate Bill 158 is now live and effective as of July 15th, and so that will no longer be a part of the accountability system moving forward. Minimum high school graduation requirements. As I said, Senate Bill 158 also amended some of those requirements. There is information actually coming out today through multiple communication channels from the department, specifically the Office of Teaching and Learning, related to these changes and how they impact minimum high school graduation requirements. What you should know in short is that it does affect the graduation qualifiers. So the A qualifiers that had previously existed are being removed as requirements, and the graduation prerequisites. So your assessments and the collection of evidence option that was there for that will also be proposed for removal. The graduation regulation is going to move pretty quickly, and that will actually be going for a first reading to the State Board of Education at their next meeting on August the 6th. So that regulation is going to kind of get a quick start on the amendments, whereas the accountability regulation will lag behind a couple of months. And we definitely felt like it was important to draw your attention to the third bullet on this slide. There is language within Senate Bill 158 that prevents a local board and district from adopting any high school graduation requirement that includes a minimum score on a statewide assessment. So many of you have initiatives in your districts that require students to be college and or career ready or transition ready in order to graduate. And you definitely need to, if you've not already started as a district working in this direction, you need to be reviewing those policies to ensure that what you do moving forward is in alignment with the new state law. Senate Bill 193 from Senator Adams. This is a bill that places an emphasis on computer science. So the bill essentially establishes a statewide goal for increasing the number and the percentage of students, particularly students in some of our underrepresented groups, in participating in computer science courses in middle and high school. So you can see the populations they're really focused on there. And the idea is that by December 1st of this year and then annually thereafter, the department will submit a report to our State Board of Education as well as the Interim Joint Committee on Education that includes an unduplicated count on the number and percentage of students that are participating in these courses, as well as all of the different types of computer science opportunities and initiatives that we have going on. And we're really pleased with this because we've been reporting for a while. We've had a strategic focus on computer science and a lot of the efforts there. And so we already produce kind of like a status report each year on some of the things we have going on to increase access to computer science. So this just really supports that, and we felt like it was a really positive bill from the session. All right, so let's move to federal legislation for a moment. You all are probably by now very familiar with the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It put about $30 billion in emergency education funding in the hands of our governors across the country, as well as state education agencies like KDE and institutions of higher education, so colleges and universities. There are two main funding sources that are impacting K-12 education. Those are the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, or what we call the GEAR Fund, and then the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, or what we call the ESSER Fund. So I'm going to quickly go through each of those for you. Let's talk first about the GEAR funding. About $43 million came to Kentucky, so Governor Beshear was able to allocate those funds at his discretion. He chose to give about $30 million of the allocation directly to elementary and secondary education, and the remaining $13 to $14 million went to higher ed. Specifically for K-12, Governor Beshear requested that the funding be used for two purposes: to support remote learning and to ensure that in any kind of NTI scenario where we do not have in-person classes, that there is a continuation of food services. So these funds are a little bit more restrictive. They have a much narrow focus as far as what they're allowed to be spent on. We were really happy to see that in addition to the districts who will receive these funds, all districts, of course, will receive access to these funds. We were able to ensure a state allocation for our ATCs of about $132,000. So that will equate to about $2,500 per ATC to have some funding to support these needs as well. Next slide. As far as the ESSER funds, which is the much larger pot of money, about $193 million was allocated for the state of Kentucky. The funds are being distributed based on the Title I Part A formula, which districts are obviously very familiar with already. And it was the most equitable way for us as an agency to disseminate the funds. So they do come here to the Kentucky Department of Education, and then we flow them down to the districts. 90% of the funds had to go to districts, and then we were allowed to set aside about 10% for state schools and state initiatives. So again, these have a much broader focus. Any activity that's currently authorized under any of the other federal programs like ESEA, IDEA, Perkins, McKinney-Vento, all of those types of expenses are permissible with the ESSER funds as well as any other activities that your district may feel like are needed or necessary in response to COVID-19. So those might be, response efforts, sanitation, PD, distance learning. The door is really open there for supporting whatever needs your local district or your school may have. So again, districts will receive their allocation of this, and then because we were able to ensure a state set aside of 10% of the funds, we have about $4.4 million that is allocated for the Kentucky Tech District of Area Technology Centers as well. Across the agency, we have really tried incredibly hard to be strategic in how we support schools and districts through the COVID-19 crisis. From the onset in March, We very quickly jumped on the development of our COVID-19 web pages. It became very clear we had to have a clearinghouse, a place where we could have all of the pertinent information, resources for schools and districts and parents and any stakeholder to find. So those have been developed. I'll share more about the CTE pages in a moment. We began implementing immediately at the onset of COVID weekly special superintendent webcasts. So every Tuesday afternoon, the commissioner and his leadership team have a webcast that is on YouTube, just like this meeting today. And it's a great opportunity for us to share pressing information, new resources, new guidance, as well as to get continued feedback from our superintendents and answer questions just like we are today through the Go Soapbox platform. Interim Commissioner Brown was also really adamant that we needed to have a way to engage all of our other state agencies and all of the other what we call K groups, all the Kentucky associations of everything you can think of. So we had a task force that was created that we are referring to as the Education Continuation Task Force. And that task force meets every other week. Again, it involves every other state agency. It involves the Department for Public Health. It involves all of our critical stakeholders to ensure that we are supporting you guys in the schools and districts in the same manner, that our messages and our guidance are consistent, that it's vetted, and that we feel like taking the right action steps to continue to support you through COVID-19. We've also implemented a number of cross-agency teams. So as you can imagine, from March 13th on, the number and abundance of questions that have come into the department is really, it's a lot. So we developed a frequently asked question document that is posted out on our website. And so every time we have questions that come in that we feel like need to be included in that is revised and updated. It's a spreadsheet that literally you could do a word search for anything you're looking for, and you can find if there's been any questions and answers posted on that particular topic. We also developed guidance on the CARES Act funding, reopening scenarios, all different types of things. So there's a cross-agency team that I represent our office on that works on all of those guidance documents that are now out posted on our website and are shared via the press releases and all of our communication channels. We have a project management team that is looking at how we reflect on the action steps we took in the first couple of weeks and how we would do things differently if this happens again, as well as planning for moving into the fall, depending upon all of the unknowns, how we will continue to support you and do our work every day. And then we've also really beefed up the professional learning that we have available in virtual platforms, and we now have a common space on the KDE website where we can share virtual professional learning opportunities. So that has taken a lot of our time as well to ensure that you guys are aware of that. So as I mentioned, specifically, we have the general landing page that you see there in that picture for all of our COVID resources and guidance. They are kind of organized around the clusters of work that we have focused on throughout the crisis: educate, feed, support, and reopen. So you can find anything and everything you're looking for there. But there are also 6 specific pages hyperlinked within that broader guidance that are specific to CTE. So we have 6 web pages right now that are serving the purpose of sharing CTE specific COVID guidance with you, as well as FAQs and really important information. So those range from, of course, Perkins accountability to work-based learning, EOPs and industry certs, programs of study, and instructional resources. So if you've not had a chance to peruse those pages, I really strongly encourage you to do that. There's a lot of really, really good stuff out there that I think you will find helpful. And I encourage you, even if you have gone out and checked them out early on and maybe haven't been back in a couple of weeks, to do so more regularly, because the information is constantly changing and updating and evolving. So that is the mechanism by which we are ensuring that all of the most important and up-to-date information is out there for you guys. And then lastly, the post-secondary resources that you see hyperlinked there. So the Council on Post-Secondary Education has a COVID-19 page, and KCTCS does as well. So for your dual credit efforts and some of the post-secondary partnerships that you have, those might be important resources to look to as well. So with that, Kylie, I think I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks to everybody for sticking with us today and listening to us give all of these announcements and these changes. I appreciate the questions on app.gosoapbox.com. If you have questions, we are still going to address those. We're moving into the very last part of this, and I will wrap it up for us. I've got several questions that I need to address at the end of this, but very quickly, these are not the only trainings that we're going to do. This week and even next week, we have a lot of virtual trainings going on with either our CTE program area consultants, and I wanted to give a shout out to them. They've done some great work to move in a very short time from what was supposed to be face-to-face to a virtual environment to continue to provide resources for all of their teachers. And that goes for our CTSO consultants as well. They've done a really great job. I really appreciate all of them. But these are not the end of the training. We've decided, because of the virtual environment, that we're going to provide a lot of trainings to folks at the time of need this year. So since we're in a virtual environment, we're going to do a whole lot more trainings this fall, right before things are due, right before you start working on things, right before information is critical that you have it. And so we have a virtual training website where we're going to post all of our trainings at. If you've been out there, there's all of this week and next week's trainings already out there with the context of who you need to reach out to. If you do not know who the program area consultant is that's leading one of those sessions, you can reach out to Reagan Satterwhite or Pam Moore, and they can direct you to the appropriate consultant, or feel free to just reach out to me as well. I know all the consultants, and so I have no problem directing you to those, but we do want you to start talking to Reagan more. Reagan is our new branch manager over all of our program areas, and she's wonderful to work with. So we have a lot of information out there for you right now. We're going to post a whole lot more information for you. We've gotten a bunch of questions about TED's training. That information is going to be on this site. Perkins training is going to be on this site. LAVEC training is going to be on this site. Any ongoing CTSO or program area consultant trainings are going to be there, and we're going to keep this up to date for you. We're also going to post recorded trainings on the same site so that you can get to those. And it's very easy to get to. You go to Career and Technical Education on our webpage and go to the very last link on the left-hand side, which is called Virtual Training, and you'll be able to get to all of these resources, recorded sessions and live sessions. The program of studies has been updated. We update the program of studies every year. There were not huge changes this year to the program of studies. The 2021 program of studies has already been out there for a year. The 21-22 program of studies is published already out there and is available on our website. So that's another year in advance of the school year. And we pledge to continue to get those program of study updates out to you a year in advance. A couple that I want to highlight really fast is that we will begin the phasing out of 3 pathways: agribiotechnology systems, computer science, and computer programming blended hybrid. Agribiotechnology will be phased out, and you'll be moving students to other appropriate ag pathways. With the computer science and the computer programming blended hybrid, we've combined those with our computer programming pathway, so that instead of 3 pathways, we have 1. And so please be aware that those will be phasing out over the next couple years, and that these will be combined into our 1 computer programming pathway. Just another update for you, based on the new standards information that came out with computer science, the information technology program area has been renamed to computer science. And that'll begin being reported on all of the documentation for 21-22. And you'll refer to the Kentucky Academic Standards for Computer Science to get the standards for all of that. But it is a change in our language. It is a change in the way we are going to communicate. And so it will be computer science moving forward. The last thing that I wanted to point out to you guys is that the division that's in charge of doing these secondary to post-secondary pathways, and the branch and the consultants, and Pam, give a shout out to Pam on this, Reagan and Morgan Lovett. They've done a ton of work to get state published CTE secondary to post-secondary pathways and dual credit pathways published on our website. Those are already approved to be used. So if you choose to use one of those, if that's what you're doing at your school, you do not need to submit local pathways that you've developed with your post-secondary partners, because they're already approved and on our website for use. You just have to identify that you will be using those. And so a huge shout out to everyone that worked on that. It was a ton of work. KCTCS has been a great partner, EKU, Murray State, and several others in getting that work done and published on our website. So that information is available by going to Career and Technical Education and clicking on program areas, and that will get you to all of this information. And with that, we are going to start addressing some questions in our app.gosoapbox.com access keyword, excuse me, keyword access is CTE virtual to submit questions. If you haven't logged on there, you can still ask questions right now. One of the, yes.
This is Carla. Before you get too far, just on your last statement about the state approved programs of study, if they're using those for Perkins, they need to match those state approved exactly for those secondary courses. That's right, Carla. So if you plan to use one of our pathways that are published on our website, they need to be what we've published on our website. So if you're going to vary from what's on our website, you will have to submit a local one. So one of the questions I received was about ELA credit, and I've waited till the very end to talk about ELA credit because I wanted you to stick with me today, to be honest. So a little blackmail to keep you here to the very end to find out about your ELA credit. If you attended today's session, reach out to me if you would like to get your ELA credit certificate, and I will send that to you. We're on the honor system here. If you watch this today, reach out to me and I will get you your CTE ELA credit for attending this session. You will get several hours of ELA credit for attending this session today. Like I said, just email me directly for that. Another question, or not a question, but a kudos we got, Leslie, and I just wanted you to hear this live, was that people are excited that we got a statewide agreement for articulated credit in legislation. So really excited about that. And I'm excited about the work moving forward as we work with CPE to accomplish that legislation. We've gotten a lot of questions about TEDS. Let me address entering data in TEDS. So we will not be unlocking TEDS for industry certification data for the 1920 school year. If students have earned an industry cert during 1920, and it's not in TEDS right now, and they're an underclassman that is coming back for the 2021 school year, you will be able to enter that data after we roll over to the 2021 school year. You will not be able to enter that data for the 1920 school year. And I just want to be really blunt as to why we've taken that stance, folks. We do not believe that the 1920 data, due to the situation we were put in and that you were put in, is going to be representative of what your school truly accomplished during the 1920 school year. And because we did not want to falsify data, we asked for you to not submit any more data. So we locked TEDS down so that you were not entering data that we did not plan on using moving forward. Being that we're still in this situation for 2021, we will be asking you to enter that information so that if there is accountability, we will have that data for you and we can put it in. I can't tell you what this school year is going to hold. I can't tell you whether or not we'll lock TEDS down again.
I don't think we will this school year, but for 1920, because we were asked to change directions immediately to an NTI environment with very little warning, the last thing I wanted schools and districts to do was to be spending their time trying to put data into a system that we probably weren't going to use moving forward. And so I wanted you to focus on students and not on data entry, which is why TEDS has been locked and which is why TEDS will stay locked for the 1920 school year for that assessment and information. But please note that if they were underclassmen that are back for 2021, we will allow you to go back and put that information in for students in the 2021 school year. So hope that addresses the TEDS questions we're getting. We received another question about the TEDS virtual trainings. Claude has been working all summer to set up TEDS virtual trainings for you guys for this fall. He's postponed all your training dates so that you didn't get locked out for not attending training every 2 years, so that he could get a really good virtual training set up for you. And so those TEDS trainings are going to be published on that virtual training website that I talked about. And Claude has done a really, really tough job in getting all of that training moved over to a virtual environment and ensuring that you're still going to get what you need moving forward. So yes, TEDS training will happen virtually this year. Leslie, we got a question about co-ops and internships and the COVID situation we're in and how that's going to affect funding if kids are unable to complete those, or if they drop out of those, or if the COVID situation just prevents them from doing that. I'm going to take a shot at answering this question, and you can help me out if you don't mind. So as we move forward into the 2021 school year, we know that things are going to be crazy. Things are already a little crazy for all of you guys. And when I say a little, I mean a lot crazy for you guys in trying to reopen schools and address all the questions that are coming out. We took steps with the LAVEC funding to waive any kind of mid-year adjustments based on what happens due to this COVID situation this year. And I can tell you that based on what happens this year, there is a chance, probably a good chance, that we will be asking for another waiver moving forward because the data we're going to have this fall is probably not going to be representative of a normal school year for us. And so if students are forced to not do co-ops, if their parents choose not to allow them to do co-ops, if the company refuses to allow them to come in and do their co-op because of the situation, please know that in the background, we will be fighting for appropriate funding for you guys based on what a normal school year would look like as opposed to one in which we have COVID-19. Leslie, do you want to add anything to that?
I would just add, I would remind you, if you've not seen the work-based learning guidance that we produced last week, there is a guidance document out there that is based on where we are at this moment. As you know, things are continuing to change and transpire, and by the end of this week, we may be in a different place than we are today. But at this moment, the guidance is that, so long as there is agreement among all parties involved in the work-based learning placement, that co-ops or internships or any other type of work-based learning could continue moving into this next semester. So there will have to be a mechanism by which you as the district or the school can collect that permission and make sure that all parties have agreed to the healthy at work, healthy at school guidelines. But as long as you're adhering to all the guidelines and all parties are in agreement, we're not going to stand in the way at this time of you all being able to continue those opportunities for kids. So that's where the guidance is at this moment. And again, that's posted on our website if you've not seen it.
Leslie, thank you for answering that and for giving that explanation, because our next question was, if schools are on a hybrid model, will that impact their work-based learning? And if they go total virtual, is that going to impact work-based learning? So I think I'll just reiterate what you just said, which is that if all parties are in agreement, work-based learning can continue.
Right.
But that is the guidance as of right now. That's an ongoing guidance document that we will update based on how the situation goes with COVID-19. But as of right now, we just want you guys to get sign off from the company, get sign off from parents and from students to make sure that everyone's okay and comfortable with those work-based learning opportunities continuing.
That's right.
Leslie, concerning internships and co-ops, are we under the guidelines to have background checks done for mentors on the employer side?
Yeah, anyone that is expected to engage with the student in any capacity is expected to have a background check pursuant to the state law.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've answered those. Sorry, guys. I hate dead air, but I'm trying to make sure I'm covering everyone's questions. Leslie, what did you mean by the graduation qualifiers in Part A will be changing? Do you mind to just go back and address the minimum high school graduation requirements? And I'm going to get back on that slide for you.
So there is language within Senate Bill 158 around the high school graduation requirements, the minimum requirements, of course, that the state sets. And the language specifically reads that there cannot be any minimum requirements that include achievement, on any post-secondary readiness indicator that's within the state's accountability system. So the language of 158 very much severs the ties between accountability and grad that our latest iterations of those two things had tried to marry. So that language specifically prevents us from having any of the post-secondary readiness indicators as an attachment to the minimum high school graduation requirements. So when we did the crosswalk of what is considered to be achieving any kind of minimum score on any type of assessment, 5 of the 8 were immediately removed because they are assessment based. The 3 that remained were the pre-college curriculum, completion of a pathway, and exceptional work experience. And so after cross-agency collaboration and legal consultation, we are moving forward with the recommendation that those additional 3 go ahead and be struck from the graduation requirements regulation because we don't want any unintended consequence of setting up a situation where there's only 3 left. And for some districts, they may not have the resources to help every student achieve one of those 3. So the beauty of the 8 was that there was a lot more flexibility and personalized opportunity. With 5 of those immediately being struck and the 3 that remain, it is the belief of the department that we will recommend that all 8 be removed. So that is what will be heard by the state board during the first reading of the regulation in August. Is that helpful, Kylie?
It is. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Scott, I know that you are no longer the information technology consultant for the state. Tanya Warren is that contact now, but since you are on this call, do you mind to just talk a little bit about why we're moving from the term information technology to computer science? We received a question about that.
Sure. And I'll do my best on that. Again, I'm not as plugged in as sorry, I just realized I don't have my headset down. Yes, I'm not as plugged in as I once was on that, but I'd be happy to give the reasoning behind it. With the new adoption of the Kentucky Academic Standards for Computer Science, the threads that came out of that work are very similar to the pathways that already exist in information technology. So it's really a rebranding of computer science, not just as programming, but that computer science is all encompassing, including things like information support and services, networking, et cetera, are tentacles, or I guess the best way to say it is fall under the umbrella of what we're calling the new definition of computer science. So it's really semantics, to be quite honest with you. It's not a large change. It's basically just the program area name is changing, but the pathways underneath of the newly branded computer science will remain the same. I hope that answers the question.
It does, Scott. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think some people might have misinterpreted exactly what I meant by post-secondary partners and the dual credit task force, are asking schools to offer dual credit on a semester basis. The main reason we are asking for that is because of the chances that COVID-19 are going to interfere with full year classes. So because the full year classes last all year, there are so many days, months, and available for COVID-19 to affect those full year classes. That's the reason why we're asking partners to start to offer semester dual credit classes as opposed to full year dual credit classes. Received a question about whether trimesters, because trimesters are even shorter than semesters, I don't think that's problematic. It's really those full year classes that could be affected in so many ways with so much time this school year that we're really asking to look at a semester schedule instead. And by no means is that a mandate from the Department of Education or from anyone else. It is a plea and a ask and a suggestion, not a requirement. So work with your individual post-secondary partners. If they're comfortable with what you're doing, that is what matters to me. But the dual credit task force is more comfortable in offering semester classes than we are those full year classes. Received another question about TED's industry certs. If the underclassmen data was put into 1920, will it need to be re-entered into 2021? The answer to that is no. If the data is in TED's already, if you put it in before we ever lock the system down, we will not ask you to re-enter that data into the system. Leslie, we got a question, and it's a really straightforward question, but I'd like for you to address this again. Should we take internships and co-ops out of the 2021 course schedules just to be safe?
I would not recommend that at this point. I think there's a lot of flexibility in how you can handle those depending upon how the situation evolves. Some folks are planning on proceeding at this point, and then if they have to pull back on the student's placement, they're going to provide some supplemental type instruction or other activities for the student to do. They're also collaborating with employers right now to see what type of virtual work can be done, where the student could still be working towards some of the things in their work-based learning plan, but doing it in a virtual environment. So while I know that you have tons of things on your plate, and I think that work around those placements is going to require a lot of collaboration with your employers, and they definitely have to be case by case types of scenarios. I would not recommend at this time that we just take those off the books completely. I think it's a little premature to do that, in my opinion.
And Leslie, while I have you on here, the work-based learning guidance document, do you have that posted on the website right now? If people are looking for a link for that, if not, then I will make sure it goes out with this FAQ.
Yeah, we'll make sure it's attached within the FAQ. We can hyperlink it as well, but it is out on our COVID-19 work-based learning page.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Question about the agenda for today. The agenda is included in the PowerPoint, but if you need a separate agenda for this presentation, please let me know and I will get you one of those. But it is the second or third slide in this PowerPoint, the agenda for today's meeting. As I've said a couple times, we are doing an FAQ from this meeting of the questions that came up during the presentation today, and we will get those out to everybody. I had a question on here, which I'm not finding now for some reason, about students doing dual credit labs makeup this fall. If students, and I did not address this during the dual credit portion, if there are underclassmen or even senior graduates at this point who were not able to finish their dual credit labs last year or have not so far been able to complete those this summer, we do encourage you to use the Healthy at School and Healthy at Work guidance that Tom pointed out earlier to allow students to finish those. This fall, KCTCS and most of our post-secondary partners are scheduling individually with underclassmen from last year that did not finish their dual credit classes to allow them to finish up during this fall semester. That will not be an additional registration. It will not be an additional class against them or against their dual credit scholarship. They are scheduling individually with students to get those makeups done. And they do have until December 31st to wrap up any of those that were affected last spring and have not been completed at this time. We did get a lot of anecdotal information back from our post-secondary partners that there's only a handful of students that are still in that situation. We are trying to collect hard numbers on that, though, from all of our partners, and I've already reached out to try and find out exactly how many students we're talking about, but I've been assured it's just a handful of students in each of those situations. Leslie, we've gotten some question, at least one question about unfunded CTCs right now and whether they can expect to receive any LAVEC funding moving forward based on the new budget bill language and the new funding.
So there's a couple pieces to that, and I'll, Associate Commissioner Horstman can chime in if he'd like to at any time. What I would tell you is that we continue to have a priority of advocating for increased funding for the LAVECs. We have a wait list of districts right now who have asked to be funded and have access to that funding source. Again, I think the concern right now is without additional revenue being put into that pot of money, that creates a real inequitable, even more inequitable funding formula for those that are currently within that pot of money. So we are continuing to advocate for increased funding for the LAVECs specifically. As I mentioned, with the new provisions of the budget bill that deal with ATC transfers to local governance, in year 2 of those approved petitions, when their budget goes from 100% to 75%, that remaining 25% that had previously been allocated for those ATCs that went to local governance is now going to go into a pot of money that's going to help support our unfunded LAVECs. So while it will probably take a few years, depending upon how many districts take advantage of those new provisions, assuming those provisions remain in future budget bills or in some type of codified statute, there will be a funding source, a new revenue source that can begin to provide some relief and support to those unfunded LAVECs. But again, that will occur in year 2. So we won't even see that money this year for the 2 districts that are currently approved with petitions. And so it's a continued priority. That's what I can tell you at this time. And unfortunately, we're in a really, really sad time with the economy, and I don't know that any of us know what to expect in future state budget bills moving forward. So that's where we are, but I can assure you that it's a top priority of our office.
Thanks, Leslie. Sorry, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say that at the end of the CTE task force deliberations, they did recognize, that is a need and that it's a steep hill to climb, but they want to move in that direction. And then we got hit with the COVID and the session didn't get completed. So I know it's on the radar of the General Assembly to start moving in that direction.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Kylie, I had hopped back on for a second just to draw attention to one thing. I know I told you all that the work-based learning guidance was out on our COVID page, and I did request that it go on our work-based learning page, but when I went out to check, I actually saw that it got posted on our end of program assessment page. So it's in the wrong place, but it is on the web, and we will make sure that it gets corrected. And again, we will make sure that you have the right link and maybe even the PDF when we send out some follow-up information. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Thanks, Leslie. I appreciate that follow-up. I'm going to paraphrase this next question, and if I don't get it right, the people asking this question are welcome to yell at me through app.gosoapbox.com that I'm getting it wrong. But this question is really for Tom and David. Is OCTE going to provide any guidance about all of the different schedules that the feeders are on for the ATCs to help streamline and provide some consistency to how teachers are teaching these students during this time? They're feeling a little overwhelmed based on all the different feeders having so many different schedules and, so many different options available to students. So they're just looking to see if OCTE is planning to release guidance around that for them.
So Kylie, we haven't given specific guidance on that because with 51 different area technology centers and 120 different districts feeding into them, it is our hope that they would make a better decision at the ground level, working with each other, working with the feeders, working with parents, to make those decisions on what is best for them in those program areas. The guidance that we've given them is specifically to help address the healthy at school concerns that we have. But with all the different items that go on, I would like for our administrators to be reaching out to those sending districts and coordinate those efforts. Now, if there are specific questions that relate to one of those, if it's a policy or something we have in place that they feel that's hindering them, then they need to reach out to us and make sure that we can address those specifics. But the bigger, broader overall question about that instructional environment, that's at the ground level with those folks that they work with. David, would you like to add?
No, Tom, I think you articulated it well. I think what we have to be concerned about is what I said earlier today is the unknown. I think what you're saying is when you see a particular barrier or an issue that you just don't know how to get around, let us know and see if there's some relief we can give you or some advice. But working with your local superintendents and sending districts and working out the best way to serve all those students. And then again, if you run up against the wall and need some assistance, they have an area supervisor that can work with them, obviously, and then our office will provide whatever support we can to help them through it.
Thanks, David. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we realize that it's not, it's not going to be a perfect world for CTE because of the hands-on nature, but there are things out there that we can do, and there are tools and resources to help alleviate some of the stress from it. But I think working together is the best way we can move forward with it to come up with the best plan. Thanks, Kylie. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to piggyback on what the two of you are saying and relate that to every circumstance this year. We are going to do our best job for all of you in providing guidance documents and guidance to you at a statewide level wherever we can. A lot of that guidance is going to have to be very general in nature and best practice in nature. It's not going to be perfect for all of you guys. We strongly encourage you to reach out to us, talk with us about your individual situations, and that will allow us to help you throughout this fall, especially with dual credit situations and with industry certs and with this EOP testing. Everyone's going to be in different situations. Not every school district's going to look identical this fall, and we just need you to help us to help you, in the words of Jerry Maguire, by reaching out to us and explaining your situation to us. And if, we will try to help you as much as we can, but a lot of these decisions are going to be at the local level due to the fact that so many different scenarios are going to take place this fall. So with that, I do not see any additional questions in the soapbox. So I am going to thank everyone for their time, thank all of the presenters that helped me with this session today. In the words of the governor, we will get through this year together, and we will get through this. Please use us, reach out to us, stay in communication with us, and we will do the best we can to help you through all of these situations. And we will continue to get those guidance documents out and posted, and we will be posting an FAQ from this and any other questions that we're receiving a lot out to you guys. So thank you so much for sticking with us. The governor has a press conference coming up at 4 o'clock. We should probably all adjourn to go and watch that. So with that, I say goodbye to all of you. Thank you.